Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 22 Business Application NYC event. We're joined by members of our NYC Business Applications User Group, NYC Power Platform User Group, and the newly transitioned Power Platform User Group on the Microsoft platform. I want to thank Dani Kahil for joining us today and delivering this session. Also, I would like to thank the members of the event organizing committee, Aaron Fishman, Mihir Shah, Arun Vinuth, and myself, Eric Levin. During the presentation, please keep yourself muted to allow everyone to hear better and remove background noise. You can ask questions at any time in the chat window or by raising your hands in Teams. So let's give a warm welcome to Dani Kahil. Dani is a solution specialist and Microsoft MVP in Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. He has over 15 years of experience implementing Microsoft Dynamics and Power Platform solutions in multiple countries. Dani also specializes in guiding companies to better articulate their needs and translates those into simple and clean solutions using Microsoft business applications. In today's session, Dani will walk us through his process of getting everyone to a shared understanding of requirements and vision, which is the key for success in our Dynamics and Power Platform projects. So again, let's give Dani a warm welcome. And Dani, you should be able to present
Cool.
Whenever you want.
Cool. Thank you for having me. And yeah, spending a bit of time together. So yeah, look, what I will do first, maybe if you stop presenting, I'll be on the camera for just a brief introduction. Perfect. Yeah, cool. Feel free to put your camera on as well if you want to. So I'll be, I guess, so I have a few slides, but I will also be talking on camera. So what I propose is, yeah, if you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll be pausing from time to time, jump on the camera, and then we can have a chat. Let's have this a bit more as an interactive session where we can kind of discuss together, discuss ideas. So it's not really a presentation with kind of a guided way. I want it to be more open for conversation. So so that's really the idea. Yeah, thank you for introducing me, Aaron. Yeah, so effectively, before really starting and talking about my process, I guess it's a subject that really passionates me a little bit more than kind of really the technical stuff. Is really try to understand, I guess, really the pain points that the clients have before jumping too fast into solution delivery, and it's based on previous experience that I had, where sometimes in my previous years I was sometimes rushing into solution and things to quickly realize at the end that you know, we didn't completely solve the problem, or we have missed kind of some of the big picture of why the clients even wanted to go that way and so forth. So I've been kind of burned in the past as well, and over the years I kind of questioned myself, well, why did this project was not such a success at the end? What could have been done better and so forth? And then over the years I kind of put together some ideas about a process I usually follow. It's not a prescriptive process. It's not a process I follow for every project, because every project is different. You know, you engage and start projects at a different lifetime of a project. So ideal situation, if you start a project from the very start, even before the project starts, you kind of have discussion with your clients about some ideas. You're involved in the kind of the sales process, or kind of the initial scoping, and then you go through envisioning and kind of, you know, building requirements, and then you deliver. That's the ideal project, because you are from the beginning to the end. But reality on the ground is that sometimes you join midway through a project, sometimes you join just after the project starts, or sometimes you join after a project has been delivered to do some enhancement. So it's really, you apply the methods and the techniques that that, or I apply the methods and techniques, I'll be sharing with you variously, depending on the project stage, of course, right? So also, I'm keen to kind of hear your thoughts as I present. So again, raise your hand, ask question in the chats, because look, there is not one way of doing. It's a process of how to get what your clients really need into giving them a solution that will solve the problem. It's a complex process with different organizations, different people working differently. So that process is my way of doing it. That again, I tweak based a little bit on the client and the needs, but there is not the only way of doing it, right? Many different people, many different consultants, even in our industry, use slightly different approaches. So I'm sharing with you my approach, but again, feel free to challenge, ask questions. If you do slightly things differently, don't hesitate to jump, raise your hand and explain what you would do differently, or what based on experience you do differently, or what can be improved, because I also want to learn, I guess, from you, right? So that's kind of the start. So I will share a few slides and I will pause and we can kind of have a bit of a chat, right? So if I share my deck, let's get started from this. Can you see my screen? Shift F5. Yes. Can you see? Yeah, cool. Cool. And I'll move you guys on the side, right? So I guess, look, the high level, right? How I understand projects and the project kind of life cycle, right? The project effectively starts even before the project starts. You have kind of what we call the project context, right? What happened for that Power Platform project to happen? What was the the context for that project to exist even, right? So I call it the project context. Then you have the project envisioning and the project delivery, where we deliver the project and we kind of build and configure the apps. So if you look at this effectively from here, in the project context, is really about trying to understand the need, right? So what I try to do, whether I join a new project, ideally from the start, but sometimes even in the middle, is really I spend a bit of time trying to understand the context of that project. What were the needs for that project to start with, right? Why did that client even engage us, or were looking at a platform to solve their problem? What were their problem, right? So what is the need, right? So I really try to understand that first. Then solutions and business benefits, right? So we know Dynamics, or the Power Platform, is one of the solutions. Otherwise, look, we are all Dynamics or Power Platform professionals. So so we know Dynamics, or the platform, is one of the solutions, but is it the only one, right? You want to ask yourself, what other solution forms the solution landscape to solve your problem, so that you better understand, right? Because not everything, Dynamics or the Power Platform, is not the answer for every single problem, right? You want to understand a bit the landscape, so that when the client talks to you about a specific, down the track of your project, about a specific requirement, you want to know what kind of other solutions, what kind of other ideas are floating around, so that you can better, explain to a client, look, I don't think that's the better fits in Dynamics. Maybe we should explore, the SharePoint project that is starting, or the Power BI project that is starting, or even sometimes it's a process change, right? Sometimes a team needs to be reorganized to accommodate for extra staff, or staff moving to do different things, right? So try to understand a bit that solution landscape, and then very quickly also I try to understand, well, who are my key users? And what do they have to do? So key users and actions. So the key user using the system, and what are the key kind of activities they will have to perform in the tool. And then at the same time, because I'm talking about key users, well, I straight away try to understand, well, what are the stakeholders involved in the project, right? So as part of those key users, they are also my stakeholders in the project, who is doing what. So I usually spend a bit of time here trying to know the person themselves, right? So jumping on a quick call with the person, or meeting them, just to try to understand, who they are, where do they come from, and kind of try to build a bit of a relationship. And I will explain a little bit more down the track, some examples, right? Then you have kind of your project envisioning, where effectively, once you understand this, you kind of have a product backlog that you build throughout iterations here. And those iterations are, that I usually do is I try to empathize and understand. The first thing I start with this, right? With the empathize and understand. So try to really go sit down with some of those key users, right? And really try to understand their pains. So whether it's interviews, I usually try also to fit a few shadowing sessions for them to show me a bit how they work. Because, you know, it helps me. I'm a very visual person as well. So I like to see how they do things kind of, you know, better. Instead of listening to what they telling me as a problem, I can also see it straight away and kind of give me some ideas about how I could help them improve things, right? Then we do a bit of defining and ideation. So this is where I usually run some workshops with the team and try to understand, clarify their pain points, and you know, make sure that I discuss some ideas with them, right? So this is where those activities are very tightly related, right? So they are not really following one after the other. Like the define and ideate, what I will do here, I'll confirm some of the pain points that I understood here, and then I will very quickly do some prototyping, whether it's prototyping on tools. I sometimes use PowerPoint to prototype some mockups, right? Or I spin up a model-driven app and quickly have some very quick forms and fields just to show the client, to illustrate some ideas of, you know, how we could solve some of their problems. Sometimes it's kind of process where I have, you know, kind of almost called storyboarding, where I have the steps that I see, so the steps of screens that I see the app doing, so that we can deliver and solutionize their problem. And I'm seeking inputs from them. So I would really want to make sure that I understood their pain point, and I propose kind of solution that makes sense to them, and get their ideas. Maybe some of them have ideas. Sometimes, often on those sessions, a lot of time I got ideas from my audience, right? Because some of them either knew a little bit dynamics, and they kind of could translate some of their pain points into a way we could do things in dynamics. Sometimes it was just ideas from outside, right? They were saying, you know, doing a workshop. Lately, we were discussing about application management, right? For trainees, and so trainees to submit application to apply to be a trainee. And so one of the stakeholders said to me during that ideation workshop, she said, look, Dani, it's almost like, you know, when you apply for a visa. So here in Australia, when you apply for a visa, you apply via a portal. So you submit a very lengthy form with many pages. You attach documents to that application and so forth. But then there is a back and forth process, right, where the department asks you to either upload additional documents, or they want other proof. So effectively, you log in again to the portal and you resubmit additional documents. So you have kind of task in the portal for you to resubmit documents. And she gave me that idea. She said, look, it's almost like this that we need for our applicant is applying, and then we have this back and forth of communication and exchange of documentation that we need to write. So it is really a collaborative session where I try to get some ideas from my audience, right? And this is where, after I get some ideas, we do a little bit of prototyping to test those ideas, right? So I would go away. It's really smoke and mirrors, right? At this stage, we do a little bit of you know, either mockups, not using the tools in PowerPoint, or sometimes using a tool like Miro just to help us a little bit really quickly collaborate. Or even sometimes, you know, proof of concept of a model-driven app, right? So I would do a prototype, and then just to test that I understood their problem right? And then we can kind of fill and put and add a bit more details to the product backlog, right? then effectively, once you have an idea of a high-level product backlog, so I'm talking here mostly epics, features, we don't need the user stories really at this level. It's kind of mostly kind of the bigger items. You have your project delivery, right? Where you have your iteration planning, iteration review, and retrospective, and then you have that first phase of I call it the analysis phase, where you look, usually a typical project that I would call an ideal project, you have your epics features defined here, and then your first sprint, you have an analysis sprint where your user stories are being picked up. They are in, or they are being created from the epics and feature. They are in draft, so not much details. Then you run you know, a demo and conversation. So you run effectively a workshop to clarify those user stories. You use some of the prototype that you had here. You can kind of update them or reuse them to go to that level, extra level of details, right? What are the rules on the forms? What is, so if you are defining, for example, business process flow, you really go down to the level, what are each of the steps in your business process flow, right? So you go to that extra level of details, which will then enhance your user stories, and then you can add acceptance criteria and so forth, and you finally hopefully reach a state of ready and agreed. So your user stories are ready and agreed between us, the functional, the solution architect, the lead dev, and then the lead dev can kind of, the design probably started a little bit before anyway, but the lead dev can kind of design the final steps, or the architect design the final steps, build, test, and deploy, right? So that's kind of the ideal project delivery for me. And then, so those iterations run where you have the analysis iteration runs before the build iteration, but they were in parallel, right? So where, you know, the analysis takes place, and then in the following sprint, the dev team builds it, but then the analysis team is focusing on the following sprint, right? So it's in parallel, but the analysis is one sprint behind the build, right? If that makes sense. Any questions? Does that sound clear? Again, that is it's evolving over time, right? As I learn and I go through my project, I kind of tweak that process. But any questions, feedback, ideas? No? Cool. I'll progress on the next slide. So really what I wanted to give you a little bit more context is this whole piece, right? This is kind of, I call it my process that I use, where, you know, if I go a little bit more into the need assessment, right? Where we say, well, why do you even want to do a need assessment? Why do you want to care about that, right? So what I found out is that I really want to make sure that I understand the right problems that I want to solve, right? So it really gives me an idea of what are the key problems and the big problems we try to solve, right? Because it also helps later ask the right questions, right? So effectively, if you understand the kind of the key problems that the company want to solve, it will slightly articulate a little bit more you know, how you run your workshop later, or it will help you articulate better your questions, right? So how I do it is effectively, I just want to keep an eye on the chat. Oh yeah, okay, I'll respond to that in a sec. Yeah, absolutely. So how? So I research online about the company and the industry, right? So for example, if I work with, so now I'm working with a university, right? So I go to the university website, especially at the beginning, I told them, I would like to understand a bit more your strategy, what's happening in the next few years, right? So I research online to try to find, you know, a business plan or something to try to understand what is the focus of the university, what are the key differentiators. I read, if I get an RFP or a business case for that project, I try to understand it, because often the client will give what are the key pain points in the RFP or the business case, right? And I talk to people. In the case of the university, and I'll stop sharing for a sec so that you can see my face. So in the case of the university, effectively what happened is I knew the university, right? And I knew the people. So I effectively told them, even before the project started, I told them, are you able to share with me your strategy? Because I knew they had one of the IT director working with the planning director working on a strategy for the next few years. And because I knew the university stakeholders, because I did a project in the past, they were kind enough to share with me a document about the strategy of the university for the next few years, which is nice for me because I understand now at their strategic level and at business level, what are their focus areas, right? And then we can go into the next steps of envisioning and working through how this dynamics in the platform solve problem, looking at and mapping that to those strategic needs, right? To make sure that we don't go and develop and build something that is not covering the needs, because we might, down the track of your project, you might get distracted with sometimes stakeholders screaming louder than others. Some stakeholders can be very pushy or very expressive, right? And some stakeholders, because of that attitude, might put a bit more pressure on the priority of project. But if you understand the real strategy, if you understand the real need, you can kind of use that as an argument. You say, look, I understand your frustration, I understand your need, but looking at the strategy, let's solve these big items first, and then we'll put your pain point, of course, to the project backlog. Maybe in phase 2 we can address it, right? So it kind of helps also really kind of tackle those kind of discussions down the track, right? Just to respond a bit to Arik on, has the pandemic cyclones affected your project envisioning? So to be fair, I thought so at the beginning. I was kind of skeptical. I think like everyone going through the pandemic. And I recall we were just starting a project. So we signed the contract, I think in February, March. And then lockdown started in April. And then I think we had one workshop, the very first workshop, the kickoff, we had it in person. And then in the next few days, whole Australia closed down or shut down and everybody went into lockdown. And everybody was a bit skeptical, right? Because that client was not used to have remote sessions. So it was always on site. It was very clear also during the sales process that they wanted us to be on site, which I understand, right? I like being on site. I like seeing clients. I like interacting with them and so forth, right? So I was also a little bit skeptical, right? But the project, we needed that project to continue. The client wanted that project to go. We had a deadline. The client wanted to depreciate their old application. So we pushed on and we continued. And the client transition scheduled all the meetings remotely. And to be fair, I didn't feel like it affected us greatly. Maybe because we met the client before, like we had at least that one session, that one kickoff session. But today, to be fair, looking down the track, so that was 2 years ago, but looking today, I'm working now with a client in another city in Australia. I actually never met them, right? So they took me on board. All the workshops are run remotely. We have teams spread across multiple countries even. So I guess the most challenging part, to be fair, is now that we work remotely with people from around the world, is the time zone difference, where we have a smaller team here in Australia working in the mornings. There is another team joining us a little bit later in the afternoon, so we kind of have to wait for them, and then we have to slot all these meetings that we want to have with them in the afternoon. So that's kind of a little bit the challenge, I think, the time zone difference. But at the same time, give us a bit more time in the morning to kind of brainstorm and kind of in a smaller group also have a bit more time for us, because then the afternoon is very hectic, busy with all kind of different calls and meetings with the team. So no, to be fair, it didn't. I thought it would, but it didn't, looking back, especially now. So yeah, I think it gives us a bit more freedom, to be fair, as well. Now, the ideal scenario, I would still want to, so ideally, is having most of these envisioning session remotely, but meet at times, right? So just to build a bit that relationship. So what I do now when I have local clients is I go and spend, when the meeting is worth it, when I know most of the people are in the office, or I know often clients have 1 day in the office or 2 days in the office, and then I try to see with the product owner or the manager to say, well, can I slot, the 2-hour workshop here? Because, then we can all sit down together, have a bit of a coffee, have a bit of a conversation outside of the meeting, because you lose a little bit that informal communication when everything is remotely, right? So I would go voluntarily to meet the client just to build a relationship with the client, but it didn't really affect much the work, I think, in my opinion, at least. How do you manage project with multiple teams? Yeah, do you want to elaborate a little bit on that, Mihir? What do you mean?
Yeah, so you would have projects where there are maybe 40 team members or 35 team members, and then as per Agile, you don't want to have more than 6 to 8 people per team, so you divide it into multiple teams. Now we have these multiple teams. How do you make sure the process is being followed, and what not worry about the technical part, but the detailed part, so that how do you make sure everybody understands what's being developed and how the requirements are being gathered on?
Yeah, correct. So for those bigger projects, right? So I haven't done so many. I'm not a big fan of those big projects myself. I've done a few. So what happened in a project we did, it was last year, massive project for a governmental institution. I think the whole program of work around Dynamics and the Power Platform, I would say easily 67 people. So divided in multiple teams, right? So, and the client, even before I joined, the client decided to follow the SAFe methodology. I'm not sure if you heard about the SAFe. So it's effectively kind of a structured way of managing agile project in bigger organization, right? So we had several teams. So there were one team with all the product owners, one team for the integration and the technical security architecture, security integration. You had what was there still? We had 2 delivery teams. So 2 delivery teams split in areas of the product. So we were building case management plus scheduling plus so forth. Another team on the same project was building the marketing for all the communication and so forth. So effectively, we run our stand-up separately. But then the SAFe Agile, what it does is you have, so it's 6 sprints. If I recall, it was 6 sprints, I think. The last sprint is kind of seeing, it's a retro sprint to see how you build everything over time, and also preparing for what they call it's a few days event every 6 weeks in SAFe, where they bring all teams together and they clarify, they over first, so it's a few days. First day is they re-articulate the problem. Every team can showcase the progress they did. Every team can kind of also work. So then they work separately during the second day. Okay, what is the goal for the next 6 sprints, right? So they work together, they prepare the next 6 sprints. It's almost like a very quick envisioning of, okay, in the next 6 sprints, our team will focus on that, this team will focus on this. And then in the afternoon, again, it's each team shares what they're focusing on. So it is not ideal. It's a lot of, look, the bigger the team, the more you spend time in communication and the more interaction, because everybody needs to be on the same page. but it has a bit of that process where I've seen some benefits where, okay, I see what the integration team is focusing on. I see where they will need our team's help in the next sprint. I see that delivery team for the marketing module, what they did, but I also see what they're planning to do and where they need our help. It's quite high level, but at least I know, okay, that team working on the marketing, they will need a few hours over the next 4 sprints of my time or one of my team's member time to fine-tune that process around, I don't know, sending communication after a case has been created, whatever, right? I'm just inventing, but there is a bit that that planning aspect also as part of it. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think you had said about the communication being more important and collaboration between teams being more critical. Yeah, that's my experience too. Thank you.
Yeah. You can take a look at the SAFe as not. Do you know SAFe?
Yes, scaled agile framework. Yeah, we have been
exactly. Yeah, SAFe. I guess it's one of the ways, I guess, to see it. Cool. Let's continue. Right, my next. So let me present again. Cool. So that's really the need assessment. Then let's go into solution and business benefits, right? So again, right, why do you want to try to understand that? Why? Just to make sure that you help the client find the right solution to solve their right problem, right? So again, how I would do this, so what I call value stream, it's also something that it's used in SAFe, right? The value stream mapping, where you map effectively the big steps of your client's journey. So it's kind of a very high level process of your clients walking through the steps, and then you can it helps you kind of identify, you know, why some of those steps are important and what kind of solutions we can effectively provide to them. Let me share actually something else. So I prepared a few. So on my website, there is a few articles that you could see. So the value stream mapping, this is the one I would use, right? Where if I go and just try to find a slide. So this explain how I use it with my clients. But if you see here, let me just open that one. Not sure why it's not clickable. Anyway. Okay, I'll solve that later. So effectively, you map kind of, this is an example for example, university, right? Where a student needs help with something, right? So kind of the big steps of the value stream, the student self-service, inquiry submission, communication about the inquiry. It's kind of the big steps that the students would go from having a problem and then getting an answer where the inquiry, you know, he gets access to information. There is the inquiry closure, inquiry history. You want to discuss some security reporting and user interface kind of needs and challenges. And then for each of those, for example, you can go into you know, how might we statement or quite try to identify the, you know, the challenges that we have here right now. So you have your challenges, you have why is it a challenge, and then you have how do we solve it, right? So for example, we could solve it with, you know, a portal. We could solve it with a knowledge-based articles. We could solve it with virtual chats. We could solve it also with maybe, you know, if we have chats, right? Because virtual chats, it's just one way. Then you get to a person. Then well, you need people to respond to question coming through chats, right? So I had a client effectively where, if I go back to that slide here, so I had a client where effectively this exercise kind of showed them a bit like I explained, right? They wanted to better help their client with providing more self-service abilities for their clients, right? So we discussed, look, we could have a portal. Yeah, that's a good idea. We could have knowledge articles on the portal. Yeah, cool. Now, the client realized suddenly, well, we don't really have a knowledge base articles. It's stored in email templates. It's stored somewhere on a SharePoint. It's stored. So probably the first thing before even having a knowledge article, it's kind of, we need to create those knowledge articles, group them first, and then we can have a solution to expose them, right? So it really helps you kind of, the solution is made of different parts. It's not only dynamics, right? It can be sometimes processes, it can be sometimes team size, it can be sometimes different team members moving to different teams, right? So you kind of try to step back a bit from the technology. It helps you step back a bit from the technology and look kind of holistically on what are the possible solutions, right? So for the same clients, we discussed those ideas, and then we had the client said, yeah, we could have, you know, virtual agents. And then when we know what kind of problems the client is having, we send those inquiry to chats and real person chatting with the client. But that company for who I was working were providing services to people with alcohol and drugs needs. Now, so they're providing services, kind of treatment services for people in needs with that were, you know, alcoholic or with drug abuse and so forth, right? And then as we were discussing, we realized, well, most of those people, when they have problems, it's middle of the night, it's very late, it's outside of the standard working hours, right? Because yes, they have a few inquiries during the day, but most of the inquiries are late in the evening, middle of the night, when people are, you know, in bed or depressed, or when they drink off, you know, so it's really outside of working hours. So having chats on the portal, well, if you don't have people and agents being able to respond to those chats, will not solve your problem at all, right? Will even create more frustration. So one of the solutions was also, well, we need to find 2 additional staff. If you want to go that path, we need to find 2 additional staff to be on guard between, you know, 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. in the morning to be able to respond to those questions, right? So it kind of helps you. And I think, to be fair, maybe we would have come to that, we would have find out that was the key issue. But I think using the value stream and quickly brainstorming the ideas together with the client, how do we solve this, because of that visual process, quickly articulates and show you what are the key problems and how we're going to solve them. And sometimes, or quite often, it's not the dynamics or a Power Platform solution. It's sometimes a little bit a process or a team change or another technology that can be helpful. Yeah, do you use? Okay, if I do functional design, technical design phase, and yeah, so the artifacts, yeah, cool. Let me articulate that in a sec, right? As I continue through the process, I will tell you a little bit more what kind of artifacts I produce. I don't produce many artifacts, to be fair, but cool, let's continue. Right. From current, let me see, timing, 20 minutes, cool. So this is where we said, right, key users, action, stakeholder, why. Again, make sure you understand the requirements, understand the frustration, build relationship. You know, the fact that you start talking to people individually, not in a workshop setting, but really one-on-one, try to build a relationship with your stakeholder. Well, in my career, this has helped me a lot, where by building a bit of a one-on-one with someone, it helped me down the track when, you know, we had some bumps during the project, because those projects are sometimes or often, you know, quite complex. Background noise here. Cool. Thank you. So those solutions or those projects can be quite complex, and you will have ups and downs, right? If you have a bit of a relationship with some of your key stakeholders, that will smooth the corners in a way, right? It will kind of take a bit of that stress, you will be able to maybe discuss that more openly with your clients. They will be a little bit more accommodating, and it's really saved me a few times. I mean, it's not that it saved me a few times, it's that my project lately over the last few years seems to be less stressful and less bumpy, and I'm pretty sure it's because I try to build a good relationship with my clients from the very beginning, and it's something that I didn't do in the past, and again, something where I got burned in the past, where I jumped sometime on a project, stop sharing for a sec, jump sometimes on a project and straight away rush into workshops, didn't really spend time to meet with the people, to try to know them. And then the first bump comes in, and then, well, there is that vendor-client relationship happening. They don't really know me. They don't really care about me. You know, I said I would, or, you know, my company said I would do it, and now I have some issues because X, Y, Z. Well, sorry, deal with that. Well, but if you spend a bit of time building that relationship with your client, and you know that person, you can then call that person and say, look, there is this thing, I haven't seen this coming. Or, you know, Microsoft is making a lot of changes on the platform, or sometimes not everything is super documented to the dot, and we have to do a little bit of investigation to find out that what we thought might work is actually not working, right? So, but the client doesn't care, right? But now you have to explain that to the client, right? So sometimes having that relationship really helps, where you can take a phone, you know, call your client, say, look, I thought, but this, I need 1 or 2 extra days. And if you have that relationship, it really helped me a lot in the past. So I would really definitely recommend this is one of the key steps you don't want to avoid doing. Try to build a relationship with some of your key stakeholders from the beginning. It will save you a lot of time and stress down the track. Cool, let's continue. Yeah, so as I said, the product backlog. So you start building a product backlog, it will just be a start at the beginning, but a product backlog, why? Then you have visibility of what needs to be done in one place. You can track progress. How do you build a product backlog? Again, there's a lot of different articles, different Microsoft Docs about Azure DevOps is pretty good too. What I've done is to help myself as well, create product backlogs with a bit of a technique. I have a few articles, again, sharing my screen. Azure DevOps, so Azure DevOps board, structuring requirements, how we structure my requirements. I have a few articles here about creating even the project UI Azure DevOps, how I structure them in epics, feature, user story, and tasks. How I explain a bit how I translate, you know, the epics from the value stream the steps from the value stream into epics, and then the features. So it's kind of give you a bit of an explanation of how to structure requirements. I have a few series on those, right? So how to structure, how to capture, and the requirement lifecycle. So feel free to kind of take a look at that. There's many other articles, of course, that I reference in my articles too. So feel free to take a look. Then the kind of empathize and understand why, and often we miss that, right? Because we look at the list of requirements and we assume that is all the requirements that my clients want, right? But effectively, you know, when you sit down with your users and you discuss with them, or even you see how they do something, so I call this shadowing sessions, it will. So first off, users don't always mention all their problems, right? So I have been on session with clients where sitting down with a user, we kind of had a list of requirements and pain points, but then she shows me, you know, how she works, and suddenly she realized, oh, you know, let me tell you about this problem. It's true, I forgot to tell you. Let me show you this problem. And there was something about, I don't know, email arriving to a wrong queue, and then she had to every day go into an advanced find and resend all those 50 emails to another queue or something. And because she was doing that every day, she was used to, it was kind of a habit. I think she completely forgot to mention it. That was a challenge, right? And then she suddenly showing me her screen, she kind of realized that she has to do it. That's that kind of a bit of pain every day she has to do it. And to be fair, I looked at this and I said, well, it's just a config, right? So effectively, I think it was based on the subject title or something that was sending to a queue. I said, well, it's just a small config. We can fix that in a few minutes, to be fair, right? And then we went to the rules to kind of send the emails to the right queue. We kind of fine-tuned that, and then almost the next day, or I don't know, I think between the time we discussed it to released it to production, it took a few days just through the process, but it was a very quick fix for us. And then we kind of fine-tuned that for her and then finished, right? So this is just an example, but a lot of time they will show you things, and for them it's not a problem because it's a habit or something. For you, it's a very quick win, or you can very quickly fix that using the platform. So I would definitely recommend spending a bit of time sitting next to your user. So as I said, interviews, shadowing sessions, then you have your define an idea. So this is where you have your workshops effectively, right? Where you want to validate that, the ideas and the solutions will solve their problem. So requirements validation. So you validate that the pain points you capture here, that you understood them correctly. I use a lot of models, of visuals. I'll use some prototypes. So I would spin a model-driven apps or a portal. I'm not so good in Canvas. I need to get my skill set in Canvas build up. So it's in my plan. As soon as I get a bit more hands-on on Canvas, I can then use Canvas to show some prototypes as well. So now I do very rapid prototyping, model-driven, sometimes portal, because you can kind of tweak also very quickly the portal. Or if it's a little bit more, I even use a PowerPoint deck, right, where I draft a square for the form, I put blocks for a subgrid here, a few fields here, just to kind of express visually how I understood the problem that we could solve them. And again, I'm seeking feedback from my users, right? I'll quickly finish that one, then we'll respond to questions. We have 13 minutes left, so that should be fine. So agile analysis. So effectively, this is the envisioning, but then once you go to the project delivery, you do a little bit of agile analysis to make sure that you're capturing the specific of, those user stories. And also here, why? Because once you do a little bit more of agile analysis, sorry, I try to challenge a bit my clients, right, to simplify the ways of working, because sometimes, clients or stakeholders or users do things because of habit and do things because it has been there for years. That's the way it works. But if you challenge that a bit, if you ask some questions, and if you try to simplify, you're coming with fresh eyes, it's definitely a good advantage for you to kind of challenge that a bit. And a tip I use sometimes is also I ask permission. I say, look, I'm coming in with my fresh eyes. I haven't been here for long, so some of the questions might be a little bit outplaced. I hope that's all right. And do you mind if sometimes I challenge a bit the way you work? Just again, to make sure that we simplify the system as much as possible and avoid complexity. And most of the time, if you say that to your client, most of the time I realize that they're actually very happy. They actually say, of course, Dani, that's actually what we want you to do, right? So very often the client will tell me, validate that, yeah, please challenge me. But this way, you kind of have their approval in a sense, because if stakeholders and different people, especially maybe you have stakeholders that build an existing system that doesn't work, right? So sometimes you challenge things, they might take it a bit the wrong way. But if you ask for permission before, it usually kind of smooths the corners and it makes it a bit easier to discuss those, right? And then and then user stories, why? But look, I use personal user stories, kind of epics feature user stories. It's one way of capturing requirements, and it's a standard way, at least it's a standard way of capturing where, as a user, I want to do this because this is kind of add a bit of structuring in the way you write the user stories, in the way you write the acceptance criteria and so forth. So that's effectively what I would do. And I think one of the questions you had, I think, Arun, was about the artifacts. Look, Usually what I have is this work, especially at the beginning, complements kind of the solution blueprint document that we produce. So so you would have, you know, the high level requirements, kind of the scope, you will know your stakeholders, you will know kind of the high level of the integration. So the solution blueprint, depending on the complexity of the project, right? But the solution blueprint effectively would be a document that is covering most of the items. So this is from Microsoft, by the way, right? There is the solution blueprint that Microsoft, their fast track stream is running, but there's a lot of documentation online about how do they run the solution blueprint. I think there is even a learn part for, I think, solution architects, so you can learn about the solution blueprint and each of those kind of areas. So I use this to structure my conversation, right? So if it's a bigger project, I'll focus mostly on requirements and necessary requirements, but and then I have, you know, specific technical architects covering those areas. If it's a smaller project where I would be the lead, I would at least try to cover some of the high level ideas here throughout my envisioning phase, right? To discuss, you know, as part of here, maybe you know, a problem is they don't have visibility from their ERP system or whatever, right? So I'll cover then the integration. Okay, ERP, you want to see data from your backend system, or you want to have some, you know, you want to import old records from. So I'm covering kind of trying to cover kind of each of those areas throughout my my workshops here. So solution blueprint, definitely one of the artifacts. The product backlog, it's another artifact definitely that we have. So it's not really a document, but it's, you know, a list of epics, features documented. Sometimes we have already some user stories documented there at this stage, and then later on, of course, as the sprints and the project continue, you elaborate on those user stories, right? The proof of concept, I would consider this as an artifact too, where I have a proof. Very often when I start a project, I say we need a dev environment, a test, UAT prod, especially for those kind of larger ones, projects. So definitely at least 4 environment, but I also want a proof of concept environment. So 5 environments effectively, right? So the dev environment will be the one where the dev team is really building, test is where the testing is testing. Then we have your UAT when you have a user acceptance testing by the end user, then you have prod, of course. But the POC is where we use it during our define and ideating workshops, where we go there, we validate some ideas, we play. So now I'm involved with a project where we extensively exploring customer voice, right? So we're using customer voice quite, we extending really the pushing customer voice, because we're using a lot of the automation from Dynamics to send surveys and add logic and so forth. So we're using a lot of this in POC because it's not really a lot of documentation on how to use customer voice directly from Dynamics and integrate that within a process in Dynamics. There is a lot of documentation on how to use the front end customer voice interface to send invite from the customer voice interface, but very little in Dynamics, very little about the automation of sending, receiving responses, adding a bit of processes there. So we're using the proof of concept environment to validate those ideas, play without really impacting the dev and that release cycle. So I would consider this also as an artifact. Jason, let me stop sharing my screen and then we can cover a bit the question. Look, that was really it from a presentation perspective. So I want to spend a bit more time now just discussing with you guys. So Jason, true scope create is good for business. How do you handle product owner? Yes, scope. So look, so you mean you're middle of a project and then you have agreed on what's going to deliver. Sorry, you're middle in a project. You're middle of the sprint, and then in the middle of the sprint, the client comes with new requirements or kind of changing the requirements for the current sprint. Is that how I understand it, Jason? Feel free to unmute yourself and changing requirements. Yeah. So, okay, I'm just waiting until, yeah. So changing requirements effectively. So that's part of it, right? So that's the nature of those projects, right? So it's normal that requirement changes. It's normal that they evolve over time, right? So ideally, right? Ideally, if you had that envisioning, the high level of the requirements for at least the next few sprints. So what I recommend as well, right? So you have that understanding the project context, you have the project envisioning, and then you have a project delivery. Now, the project delivery, we're not talking about the delivery of a few years, right? We're talking about maybe you want to deliver the customer service module. I would call this a project. So you deliver this project, the customer service, or if it's a very big project for customer service, maybe for even one team or one department, that's your project. Then you release that, you go live, you do another project envisioning to kind of define a bit, again, the high level requirements and feature for the next few sprints, right? So if you had that a bit, those big items should not really change a lot for the next few sprints. They should be, so it's more the details that's changing, right? So as you start a sprint, so we try to use Agile on most of our project, right? So we have kind of the user stories are ready and agreed. As I'm not sure if you saw some of the slides I was presenting, but you actually, maybe I will reshare a bit. Let me go back to this one. So if I go back to this one, right? So you have your analysis iteration, right? So you start with your user stories in draft. What happens then, you have your workshop with your client, you define some acceptance criteria, business rule, your client says, oh, the form needs this and that, or this field need to be required, or, you know, that business process flow needs to have those steps, or that email needs to be sent automatically, and so forth, right? So you define those there. If you need some prototyping kind of to validate some ideas, you can use it. Then you define those in your user stories and acceptance criteria. Now, depending what is your relationship with your client, if you have a very kind of formal relationship with everything needs to be documented, there is hard contractual, which maybe that's the case of your project, then effectively all the rules are written down in the user story, in acceptance criteria. That's how the user story needs to work. Now, everybody agreed. So normally the project owner signs off the user story. So you document the user story with all the acceptance criteria. The user story doesn't progress to build until the product owner understands the story and put a stamp. He signs off the user story. The user story is ready to progress to development. Now, that story should not be changed during development unless there is, we know how flexible is Dynamics in the Power Platform. If it's moving a field from left to right or making a field always read-only or something, we kind of can accommodate that. Again, sometimes the relationship is so contractual and so tense that we say no, as a project manager would say no, but most of the time those small kind of tweaks, we can still accommodate them if we realize that we made a mistake, or that it was not clearly articulated in the user stories. Because, you know, sometimes we'll have mock-ups, right? And mock-ups of forms, of complex forms, and we go here and realize, oh, that field should actually be read-only, or that field should actually not be visible, right? So those small changes we can accommodate during the sprint. But anything else, we cannot change the user stories anymore, right? So anything else needs to either be captured as a change. The story needs to be put back in the backlog for the next sprint, or we create a new user story, right? So that's where, again, depending what kind of relationship you have with your client. If you have an open relationship, you can just say, look, let me finish that story now. Let me finish how we have, or at least the part that we agreed on, and then in the next iteration, I'll make the change later. If it's a bit more formal, you might have to check with your project manager how to handle that. And I would recommend create a new story, or the same story, we pause the story, and if it's too big of a change, and then you push back and you put it back. But that has an impact on, of course, the budget, the project delivery, and so forth, right? So did that respond to your question? I assume yes. Cool. I think we're right on time. Thank you for your time, your questions. Anything else? Otherwise, we can pause here, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Appreciate.
No worries.
I actually like that whole process you showed, and you took the time to explain the different steps in the process, and I'm sure the team here, I enjoyed the presentation, and I'm sure everybody here also enjoyed.
Thank you.
Yep. And I want to thank everybody who has come here for this session. And please stay tuned for our next session, which will be published soon. And hopefully everybody is watching the conference that's going on today and this week on the Microsoft Power Platform Conference in Florida. So we'll get a lot of updates, and we will be able to talk about some of the new updates that are coming in the future sessions that we have. Eric, you want to talk further?
Yeah, just 2 minutes. So as we mentioned in some of our previous meetups, we're transitioning to the Power Platform user groups. So if you want to just take a picture from your phone, or go to the look for us in the Power Platform user groups. We have about 80 members transitioned so far, so we're looking for the other 300. And we'll be posting all of our future events there, and sometime during the end of the year we'll decommission the meetup. For our we posted this before. If you haven't seen it so far, just go take a look at the features that are coming out as part of the October 2022 Wave 2, and both for the Power Platform and Dynamics 365. And then finally, for our next events, we kind of have multiple events lined up right now. In October, next month, we'll be having an event on Power Pages with Hugo Bernier. He's a principal product manager, I think, at Microsoft for the Power Pages. In November, we'll have a session going over the Dynamics 365 and Power Platform Wave 2 once it has been released to the North America region. And December, we don't still have a date, but we are planning to have an event on Dynamics marketing. So hopefully we can keep those coming. Maybe we'll take January off, as we discussed earlier, or move something around there. So thanks again, Danny. This was a great session. Appreciate you joining us.
Right.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.